Okay, my friends, good to have everyone here and welcome to our Bible study course. Yeah, you see, it brings people back together. That and a little trip to Mazara's, worked out really well in terms of the cheese today. So that's really good. I'm not sure who this is in the gray car. That was somebody. Okay, so let's learn a little bit. And we can hear me at home. Give me a thumbs up. Thank you. All I could see on this, I'm on the iPad, I could see Leah, but that's all I could see right now. But I know we have a few people on. L'chaim, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay.
It's gonna blow.
I'm going with Melissa. It's gonna blow over, she says.
But Bonnie said it wasn't gonna rain at all, so.
I never put the top on the tent, and I always get soaked.
Yes. Okay. It is traditional during the festival of Sukkot to read from the book of Ecclesiastes. Has anyone read Ecclesiastes before? Hopefully everyone has been in my class for more than 2 years because we read it every year. So the answer is yes. Yes, we have. Ecclesiastes is not Hebrew, obviously, nor English. It is actually Greek. It is the Greek translation of Kohelet. Kohelet literally means the gatherer. It's the one who gathers in. And with Job and with Proverbs, these books, as three of them together, are called wisdom literature. Wisdom literature seeks to explain the nature of the world, the God who created and controls it, and the place of human beings in this divine creation. Ecclesiastes, as we're going to see, wisdom is relayed more through personal experience, intellect, right? And so the author's going to say, I have seen this, I have observed that, and this is how the world works. Never claims to be God-given, never says in the whole text, God speaks or thus says God. That's not in this text. It's all the author's personal experience. And doesn't really talk about God too much per se, but just the view of life. Never talks about Israel, never talks about Torah. So it talks about, this is what I see in life. This is what makes sense to me. This is what doesn't make sense to me. It's read, as mentioned, during Sukkot, sort of the fall harvest. The idea of the joy in completed work, and sort of the idea of memory plays a big role here, past and present, as does with Sukkot. You had memory of us building and wandering through the wilderness with our Sukkot, our temporary shelters, right? The idea of impermanence is going to run very deep through Kohelet, and just the idea of all things change, right? Ecclesiastes has that famous passage about for everything there is a season, a time and place under heaven.
Right.
So sometimes it rains, sometimes there's sun. It fits right in. I think we're getting a little wet. It's definitely a very different book. It has a lot of themes, and as I mentioned, that don't really jive so much with the biblical text. So there was even some debate about whether or not we should even include this in the Bible. That's okay. But the rabbi said, sure, we're going to keep it in the Bible. We're going to keep it in our text. And one of the main reasons why is that they attribute this book to Solomon. And if Solomon writes something, you're going to keep it. Was it written by Solomon? No, it wasn't written by Solomon. But the idea is it's written by Solomon in his old age, that's where it is. The idea of Solomon writing it makes sense from it says it was a king who originally wrote it, and that this guy is obviously someone who's rich and has gathered in life's pleasures.
Someone wants you to know if it was being recorded.
Yes, it is. And that there's some Persian words in this as well. And so again, a little bit later than Solomon. What do we think? Do we run it inside? Yeah, I don't mind it, but I just want to make sure everyone's okay. As someone just referred to me, we aren't made of sugar. They'll be all right. We'll be all right.
but over here it's still getting wet.
Yeah, it comes start there, you live here too. Not so.
Okay.
It's okay.
Okay, everyone's huddling underneath to make sure they don't get soaking wet here. It's a little
Rabbi, the
risky.
radar doesn't look good.
You see, the radar doesn't look good according to Polly.
Now, according to Bonnie, it was not coming here.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
radar said no.
This thing should have been straight.
You need to see there's a lot of green coming your way.
Yeah, I have here that like at 8 o'clock, it's looking a little bit dicey, but we're a little bit before 8 and we're getting it now. I figure 8 o'clock we could dive into the synagogue perhaps. But apologies, we're dealing with a few different variables today at the synagogue at this moment, but we're getting there. Okay, the rain being one. Chapter 1 of Kohelet. Let's just dive right in, and let's have some. We're going to try to see if people can read, you guys at home, and we'll see if you can hear them. I think you should be able to, but let's read nice and loud. How about we'll start with the Brahms over here on page, first page, page 3 in your playbook here. The words of Kohelet.
The words of Kohelet, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Utter futility, said Kohelet. Utter futility. All is futile. What real value is there for a person with all the gains he makes beneath the sun?
Keep going.
One generation goes, another comes, but the earth remains the same forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and glides back to where it rises, southward blowing, turning northward, ever turning blows the wind. On its rounds the wind returns. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place from which they flow, the streams come back again. All such things are wearisome. No one can ever state them. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear enough of hearing. Only that shall happen which has happened. Only that occur which has occurred. There is nothing new beneath the sun. Sometimes there is a phenomenon of which they say, "Look, this one is new. It occurred long since in ages that went by before us. The earlier ones are not remembered. So too those that will occur later will no more be remembered than those that will occur at the very end."
Thank you for that. A good start. So let's take a look at this text a little bit. Whoa. So Kohelet, son of David, again, gives a little bit more credence to the idea of this being Solomon. And here he's a real upper. He's a great party guest. Utter futility. Everything is terrible. Utter futility. What real value is there for a person? So the word in Hebrew is hevel. And hevel in Hebrew has different connotations. One of them is breath, right? Sort of, that vapor. That everything is sort of vapor. So what's like vapor? What's breath? Can you hold on to it? No, right? And it sort of goes out and it's gone. And that's sort of it. You have another one that also goes out and is gone again. So you can't really catch it. You can't capture it. We have a gentleman in the Bible whose name in Hebrew is Hevel. And that would be Hevel. In the beginning of the Bible. Close? Kids?
Kids.
Who Abel, Hevel, there we go. Those sounds come around. Abel, right? So Hevel, Abel, right? What is Abel's characteristic in the Torah? What does he do really well? He dies really quick. So he's on the stage for a very short period of time. Abel does not get a lot of play in the Torah. He's there 1 minute, gone the next. Does one thing, there he goes, right? And so the same idea, right? So he's transient in the story, much like Kohelet will say here, life in general, right? It is ephemeral. You can't catch it. And that there is no value because you're going to gain stuff in your life. You're going to collect things. And then what's going to happen? You're going to lose them because you're going to die and it's going to be it, right? So you're going to work really hard and you're going to amass all this stuff and then you're going to die. And then what's the good of all that you amassed? Nothing. It can't help you because you're not going to be buried with it. You can't use it, right? So one generation comes, another goes, but the earth keeps on spinning. We'll see if that continues. But hopefully the Earth keeps on spinning. We'll see with global warming. But Earth keeps on spinning forever and ever. The sun rises, it sets, great. The winds are blowing, the sea, it keeps growing, never full. Great. Those things are eternal. But what's not eternal? Us, right? We are not eternal. We come and go. And even further than that, there's nothing new. Same old story, different day. You watch the news, this stinks. You know what? It stunk before too. And then things get better. And what happens? They get worse again. But back and forth, right? It goes back and forth. Things go well and things go poorly. And everything just happens over and over again in a cycle. It's not linear. Time goes in a circle in this case. So that's a very interesting idea. Okay.
Rabbi, where's the link for someone to get
In the email.
in the email?
Yeah. In the temple email.
Temple
As
email.
true before as it was before.
Can they go on the temple site to find it?
Yeah.
Go on Temple B'nai Israel site and they'll have a list of things.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Well, now it seems to have passed. Now it's a little bit easier. It's not as much rain at the moment. Tyler, you want to pick up here? I Koheleth?
Was king in Jerusalem over Israel. I set my mind to study and to grow wisdom all that happens under the sun. And unhappiness is that which God gave to humankind to be concerned with. I observed all the happenings beneath the sun, and I found that all is futile in pursuit of wind. A twisted thing that cannot be made straight, a lack that cannot be made good.
Okay, so he's going to study a little bit, right? He's going to study and probe. He's a wise guy. He's like almost a scientist, or philosopher. He's going to study. He's going to try to learn about happiness, learn about wisdom, and he's learning about wisdom. He's just smart enough to know there's a problem, not smart enough to figure it out, right? That's sort of the curse of humankind. We're smart enough to know there's a problem, but we're not always smart enough to figure out the actual solution. So the thing that is twisted, the thing that is broken, cannot be made straight again. It can't be made good. So that's what our author here says. And so he's got wisdom. He's a smart cookie, as we said. Let's keep going. Next paragraph, Bonnie, you want to give that a read?
I said to myself, here I have grown richer and wiser than any that will before me over Jerusalem. And my mind has zealously absorbed wisdom and learning. And so I set my mind to appraise wisdom and to appraise madness and folly. And I learned this too was pursuit of wind. For as wisdom grows, vexation grows. To increase learning is to increase heartache.
Okay, so what's he saying here in these last couple sentences?
Everything is temporary.
Everything's temporary, right? Because he's learning, and futile also. As wisdom grows, vexation grows. Heard that expression differently? Ignorance is bliss, right? Because if you increase learning, you increase heartache. The more you know, the worse it gets. I think I've used this example before, but once in a while, Rabbi likes to indulge in a little hot dog. It's one of my older one's favorites. Nice hot dog, little Nathan's, good times. Do I want to know what's in the hot dog? No. To increase my knowledge, it will only increase my vexation. I'm not going to enjoy the answer. I'd rather not know. And I think that goes on for, frankly, a lot of things. Sometimes we feel we'd rather not know. Now, is that always good to not know? Not really. Like Judaism, right, as a religion, just taking it from a Jewish perspective, we prize wisdom the most, right? That's our most, one of our most important values is learning. But, and he doesn't say don't learn, right? But he says sometimes learning makes life a little harder. It's a little unpleasant. The more you know, the less happy you are with knowing. Sometimes not knowing feels a lot better, but once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. And the more you know, I think the more stressed we get. Again, he's not saying don't learn, right? But he's saying that it's not always the easiest thing to learn and to gain in wisdom. And I think, again, not too hard to think of some examples where that might be true even today, aside from my good old hot dog metaphor. Okay. Okay, so we're going to keep moving forward. Okay, chapter 2. Chapter 2. Okay. Here we go.
Come, I will treat you to merriment. Taste mirth. That too I found is the louder to. Of revelry, I said, it's mad. Merriment, what good is that? I ventured to tempt my flesh with wine.
L'chaim.
To grant folly, while letting my mind direct with wisdom to the end that I might learn which of the two was better for men to practice in their few days of life under heaven. I multiplied my possessions. I built myself houses and planted vineyards. I laid out gardens and groves in which I planted every kind of fruit tree. Constructed pools of water, enough to irrigate the forest, shooting up the trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I acquired stewards. I also acquired more cattle, both herds and flocks. Those all of whom would inform me Jerusalem. Further amassed silver and gold treasures of kings and provinces, and I got myself male and female singers, with as well as the luxuries of commoners, coffins and coffins of them. Thus I gained more wealth than anyone before me in Jerusalem. In addition, my wisdom remained with me.
Okay, so here he goes, right? So the man's got some cash. He's got some coin. And he's, you know what? If wisdom isn't the answer, right? If being the smartest guy in the room, the smartest person in the room isn't enough, that's vexation. Forget that. Let's try some hedonism, right? Let's try some of that. Let's just have some fun, right? Let's try to just, enjoy life. Let's get some good wine. Can't complain. A little good wine. And then just, more and more stuff. I multiplied my possessions. Houses and vineyards and gardens and groves, pools of water, some slaves, some stewards, and everything, whatever he wants, he has it at his hands. And you know what? He gained more wealth than anybody before him. That's amazing to have all this stuff. And does that make him happy? No, what a complainer. He doesn't have it. Hi, Sandy. Okay. On page 6, Sam, I pick that up there. Nice and loud.
I withheld from my eyes nothing they asked for, denied myself no enjoyment, rather I got enjoyment out of my wealth. And that was all I got out of it. And my thoughts turned to all the fortune my hands had built up, to the wealth I had acquired and won.
Yeah.
And all was all futile. Pursuit of wind. There was no real value under the sun. What will a person be like who will succeed the one was ruling over what was built up long ago? My thoughts also turned to praising wisdom and madness and folly.
Okay, yes. And so he denies himself nothing. Nice to have money. Good to be the king, as Mel Brooks taught us, right? He has money, he has power, and he's just getting all the enjoyment he can. And once again, it's all futile, all pursuit of the wind. Why bother? All this money and all this good stuff he's buying isn't worth it in the end. It's all vanity. There's no value under the sun.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
would you turn the page? We don't, in the remote, we don't see the page you're on now.
Yes. We're on the next page. Thank you. Yep. Okay. And so this is where we have here. You got to mute though. Okay.
I want to know about reparations from Egypt.
Reparations.
Did we get reparations from Egypt?
According to tradition, we did. We grabbed all the stuff we could carry on our way out. That's how we built the tabernacle. Had all that stuff because we took a lot of stuff to go.
What kind of stuff? A little bit of stuff. We didn't take a whole lot.
According to the a lot of jewelry and gold and
Lots of
wood,
gold.
and the dolphin skins. all that good stuff that we needed to build the tabernacle we took to go. It was 400 years of slavery, though. It was a lot of slavery. So just grab whatever you had, put it in the cart with you. Okay, and so all that value, all that wealth, in the end, doesn't really help you. Okay, let's go to the next paragraph over here, beginning with, I found that wisdom. Okay, Rick, you want to give that a read?
I found that wisdom is superior to folly, as light is superior to darkness. A wise person has his eyes in his head, whereas a fool walks in darkness. But I also realized the same fate awaits them both. So I reflected. The fate of the fool is also destined for me. To what advantage, then, have I been wise? And I came to the conclusion that too is futile, because the wise man, just like the fool, is not remembered forever. For as the succeeding days roll by, both are forgotten. Alas, the wise man dies just like the fool.
Oh, yes, again, so he's not really giving us a lot of happy thoughts right now. That he does note that the wisdom is better, right? Wisdom is superior to folly. That's clear. You know, a wise person can see what's in front of them. The fool walks in darkness. But what's going to happen in the end? Going to be dead. That's it, right? You're going to die, right? And so if you're brilliant in this world, if you're, a scholar, and if you're someone who can't, do much of anything, with your mental acuity, in the end, the ground awaits us both. And also forget even that, but in Judaism, right, we have Yisker, services, right? We have services of remembrance. Talk about memory a lot. And in Kohelet, eventually, what does he say? Eventually, you're forgotten, right? Eventually, you're forgotten. That's a reality, right? Eventually, we're all forgotten in a way. That you go back, 200 years. We have a sense of maybe who our parents were, our grandparents. Some of us might be lucky enough to have memories of our great-grandparents. But great, 200 years ago, 300 years ago in our line, do we know anything about those people? Probably not, You pass down some names, right? And then the names can be kept alive.
Rabbi, that's why they have Ancestry.com.
Yeah, exactly, right? So you can do that now through genetic testing. It's a little more, well, I'll give the positive version. I have two versions of this. The positive version is, right, if you're an Edison, like if you are a great inventor, a great thinker, a great author, whatever it is, that's one thing, right? Like your works live on. The person you don't know as much about, but at least the works can live on, right? And the opposite extreme, of course, if you do something so horrible, your name is not forgotten, right? It's the other way, that your name is remembered if you're infamous as well. Famous versus infamous, right? You can be remembered for that as well. But for the most part, most people eventually sort of fade away. It's not the most fun thought, but we eventually just fade away. Okay, and so with these great ideas, you can see what's going to happen next here. Renee, you want to pick up there?
So I loathe life, for I was distressed by all that goes on under the sun, because everything is futile in pursuit of the wind. So too, I loathe all the wealth that I was gaining under the sun, for I shall leave it to the man who will succeed me, and who knows whether he will be wise or foolish. And he will control all the wealth that I gained by toil and wisdom under the sun. That too is futile.
Oh my goodness! So he's not giving us anything here. Real uplifting, right? He's an uplifting. That's why you have wine, because he's very uplifting, and you need some happy thoughts that might help out here. So yeah, so he said, "Look, I'm going to gain all this money, gain all this wealth, and then what happens? I'm going to leave it to my bozo kids, and who knows what's going to happen with my money then? Whether it be wise or foolish, he's going to have everything that I worked my tail off for, and he's going to get it. What's he going to do with it? We don't know. We can't control it because we're going to be dead. That's right. He is fixated on death. Well, yeah, death is a big part of it, obviously, but I think it's like an idea of impermanence, and so let's take a step back for a second. So like one way that we square the circle here, right? Because if everything is vanity and everything is impermanence, it's a bummer, right? And so how do the rabbis who read this book, I'm talking about the rabbis who had to deal with this text, at first century, second century, third century, CE. They had to deal with this text. It was there. And so they had to go, oh, God, what is this? What are we going to put in our Bible? And it's written by Solomon. Okay, let's put it in. So how do they figure this out? How do they make this feel a little bit more uplifting?
It shows the importance of making good while you're still alive.
That's a big part of it, right? Do good while you're still alive. And of course, the good old panacea to everything, afterlife, right? Everything is impermanent here. And sometimes life stinks here. And sometimes things are unfair here. But at the end of the day, so to speak, or the end of days, probably better said, right? Things will get better there. Then everyone will get what they deserve.
Is that what they believe?
Do you believe that?
Who's we?
Jews.
Which ones? No, I mean, that is, it's tongue in cheek, but yet that is honestly the answer, right? The question was about afterlife for those at home. So make sure you guys hear it. And the answer is, it depends on who you're talking to. I think there are some Jews that have a very robust belief in the afterlife, and believe that there's going to be some kind of olam haba, the world to come. And there's going to be some kind of, I don't want to say reward, but you can say reward, right, for the good deeds here. And there are going to be some chastisements for those who maybe are doing the wrong thing. But the Jewish belief in afterlife is definitely multifaceted. You have Jews who believe in heaven, Jews who believe in heaven and not hell, Jews who believe in heaven and hell, Jews who believe in limbo, Jews who believe in reincarnation, Jews who believe in a lot of different things. The most that we really proffer is the eternality of the soul, right? That's one thing that we do say, even in the Reform movement, the idea that the soul is eternal, something within us that doesn't die. What it does after that, I don't know. Can't tell you. No one's come back to tell me what's happening afterwards. I certainly like the idea of a conscious heaven, right? Sort of the idea that when we pass away, there is something that we sort of do wherever, and that we have some consciousness that's everyone. Well, I won't skip everybody, but I think that's a common hope, right? That there's going to be still some of us that goes on in some way that we are aware of, or maybe we're just absorbed back into the ether of whatever it is, and we're part of everything. We're in the trees, we're in the breeze, we're in the rain, we're in everything, right? Or you're just in the ground, and that's sort of it. I think that's probably more of the actual author's line of things. I think he's more of you're in the ground, and it's sort of over. Because back when he was writing, there was less of a emphasis on the idea of afterlife. That comes a little later in religious history. The idea of afterlife. The Bible has no real conception of afterlife. That comes in rabbinic Judaism and in the birth of Christianity. You get more of a sense of there is an afterlife, and maybe there are angels, and maybe there are harps, and maybe there are unicorns, and maybe there's a steakhouse, and that's what I'm going for. But that's what I call it, the big steakhouse in the sky. After we go, I get to go up to heaven and sit with Maimonides and Moses, and we get to talk about Judaism and philosophy, and I get to have a beautiful tomahawk ribeye, and I get to have, this is very important, this is the key, I get to have cream spinach next to it, because in heaven the kosher rules no longer exist. So I get to have some cream spinach with my meat for the first time. I don't. It's just faith, Renee. You can't rob me of faith. This is the key. But isn't that the idea, right? That like sort of whatever we hope, and I'm being sort of silly, but the hope is, I think, for all of us, right? If we really believe in a conscious heaven, isn't it like whatever our dream is, right? Wherever we would feel contentment or bliss or whatever it might be. And my kids have been asking questions about it. They're at that age, to ask a little bit about death and about, what happens afterwards. Having a rabbi as a dad doesn't help them. In terms of again, they're going to ask us questions so they hear me talking about it, right? But the idea of like, do we see our relatives, right? That have gone before us. We get to talk to our parents again, our grandparents, our siblings, our spouses that have gone. It's a beautiful idea, and I would love it to be the case, and I hope it is the case. For those of us who sort of want that, I think that's a wonderful thought. And so, again, until someone tells me, I'm going to say, it's the ultimate expression, I think, of faith. Honestly, I think it is. It's the ultimate expression of faith, the belief that God has implanted in us something eternal that does not go away, that stays forever. And whatever that looks like in the future, we don't know. But that's what we can hope and pray for, whatever it might be. I think I got a couple questions here on the chat. So just give me 1 second here. Yes, I'll keep working on that. A little ice cream, a little hot dogs. Excellent. Yes. People know me well. It's been a couple of years. People are learning some of my predilections. Okay. We are right where we're supposed to be now on the Zoom in terms of the pages. And so we're there. Heather, you want to give it a read from there?
And so I came to view with despair all the gains I had made under the sun. For sometimes a person who is fortunate made with wisdom, knowledge, and skill must hand it on to the portion of somebody who did not feel for it. That too was futile and a great evil.
Indeed, yeah. So again, a similar idea that just again, you can work hard, you can do whatever you can do, wisdom, knowledge, skill, whatever it is, and someone gets it and they don't know what to do with it. They don't have, because they didn't work for it, right? It's all futile. It's all depressing. We're gonna move forward. Let's turn the page over on page 8. We're gonna skip ahead a little. Go ahead, please.
You have to have the ice cream before the hot dog though?
It's easier that way, according to rabbinic Judaism. You have to have the dairy first,
Right.
and then you can get a little water, a little wine, and then you can have meat right away. But if you have meat first, you have to wait 3 to 6 hours, or you can have dairy, according to tradition, because the meat gets stuck in your teeth. As my ribeye aficionados would know, you get a little, meat in the teeth, whatever it is. You can't have your creme brulee afterwards, and it's a problem. Serious concern. And lesson is, as always, eat dessert first. Okay, they frown on that in your more nicer steakhouses. Okay, let's get to the famous passage here that everyone loves. We're on page 8, chapter 3. Let's see if this works from home. Sharon, you want to unmute and try to read it so everyone can hear it?
Okay, can you hear me? All right.
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. A season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for slaying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time for shunning embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for ripping and a time for sewing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. What value then can the man of affairs get from what he earns?
Okay, so yes, our very famous passage, song from, who wrote the song?
Simon and Garfunkel?
No.
No?
The birds.
Yes.
There we go. Thank you for that.
Bob Dylan wrote it, the birds sang it.
A little turn. Okay, and so again, this is our most famous passage, sometimes read at funerals, again, for that very reason of impermanence, right? That there's a time for everything. And there's a time for the things that we like, and sometimes there are times things that we don't like, and that's part of life, right? Because that's what happens. Everything that we have is lent to us, and there's a time for every emotion, right? And so it also, by the way, gives a sense of freedom, in my opinion, because if we admit to ourselves that sometimes there is a time for weeping, a time for losing, a time for discarding, et cetera, that is empowering in its way, right? We recognize that's part of life. That it's not abnormal. It's actually just part of the human condition. It's part of existence. That sometimes things are lousy and sometimes things are good, and we can accept that as a reality and not expect things to be good all of the time. But that's not realistic. Again, as we said, in every life, a little rain must fall. And we have this idea here, right? There is a time for everything. And sometimes it's up to us. That's another thing I throw in here, to decide which time it is, right? Because I think there is some idea of one can look at it as saying, well, this is just how it works, that it's circular, that things are going to happen, good and bad. One can also say that sometimes we get to choose which time it is. Is it a time for embracing? Is it a time for seeking? Or is it a time for silence, or a time for whatever it is? And when I read this, I also think that, again, in addition to this feeling this maybe predestination to the time for everything, maybe we get to decide, as well, that we get to make a choice which time it is, depending on which condition it is, which phrase it is. Okay. Polly, you there? You want to read?
Sure, I can read.
Okay.
I have observed the business of God gave mankind to be concerned with God, bringing everything to pass precisely at its time. God also puts eternity in their mind, but without man ever guessing, from the first to last, all the things that God brings to pass.
Okay, so yes, and this is what I was speaking about before, and actually it's where the afterlife comes in as well, that God puts thoughts into our mind, right? Like God gives us the ability to question, but not the knowledge for the answer, right? God puts eternity in our mind, lets us know that perhaps there's more to this life than what we experience. But after that, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen from the beginning to the end. It's all a wondrous mystery. There, those lights came on, not our sukkah lights.
Is that enough time?
Yeah. I'm saying, yes, and B should go on hopefully then shortly. We'll see, but that helps a little bit. Okay.
Song update. Pete Seeger actually wrote Turn.
Pete Seeger. And then so he wrote it, but then who sung it? He actually.
For the birds.
Oh, the birds.
Many
Everybody
people sang.
Yeah.
Pete Seeger.
Okay. They all sang it. The hits keep coming. Okay. Okay. Thus I realized. Okay, let's see. Polly, want to give me one more? Thus I realized.
Thus I realized that the only worthwhile thing there is for them is to enjoy themselves and do what is good for their lifetimes. Also, that whatever a man does eat and drink and gets enjoyment out of all his wealth, it is a gift of God. I realize too that whatever God has brought to pass will occur evermore. Nothing can be added to it, nothing taken from it. And God has brought to pass that men revere God.
Okay, thank you for that. So again, what's the answer? Eat, drink, be merry, right? Enjoy. It's a little much, right? In a way, right? Because that doesn't really sound very Jewish, right? That we say the key to life is eat, drink, and be merry, right? We have these things, what they call mitzvot. That's right? We have a lot of different commandments that we have to follow according to Jewish tradition. We're not getting any of that here, right? We're getting eat and drink and be merry. And, again, maybe a little faith, right? A little faith in God, that things are going to happen, right? Good and bad. And we sort of have to accept it, that that's the reality, that things are just going to happen, good and bad. It's part of life. Take the bitter and the sweet. I don't remember the poem for that one, but yes. What's her name wrote a good poem on that. Good old what's her name? Israeli poet. Can't remember her name.
Who wrote Eat, Drink, and Be Merry, for Tomorrow We Die? What is that? Epicurean?
I don't know.
I think it's Epicurean.
Epicurean?
Yeah, for Epicureanism.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. Oh, that's good. Okay, so since I have, what time is it now? Oh, we got a couple minutes left. Okay, so let's move forward. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. Skip ahead. Chapter 4. We're on page 10 in our playbooks here. Let me see. Debbie Siegel, you there?
I'm here. Up in
You're
the-
here. Excellent. Nice to see you.
Where it's not raining.
Yes. Do you want to read a little bit? I further observed. We're on chapter 4.
I further observed all the oppression that goes on under the sun, the tears of the oppressed with none to comfort them, and the power of their oppressors with none to comfort them. Then I accounted those who died long since more fortunate than those who are still living, and happier than either are those who have not yet come into being and have never witnessed the miseries that go on under the sun.
Ugh. Yeah, he's definitely a drag. That first starts okay. He understands there's injustice in the world, right? We mentioned this before. This idea that like sometimes terrible things are going to happen. He notices all this oppression that's happening, and that the people aren't being comforted, in their oppression. And then he goes on a little trip here for us, and that those who died long since, more fortunate than those who are still living. Better to be dead is what it sounds like.
Mhm.
I would read it a little bit differently than better to be dead. I think what he's saying here is not that per se, but it's the idea that once you have passed on, you are free from all of this mishigas, that you don't have to worry about it anymore. So it's Thursday night. And the Elah has ended, exhausted, long day of standing and praying, right? So you know what it's time to do when the Elah ends? Get a little water. And here God smiles on me a little bit. The Giants are playing on national TV, Thursday night football. Get a little Chinese food, get to the house, watch the game. The only way I was staying up for 3 hours was to watch this football game because I was exhausted. And so, of course, the Giants are up by 2. The other team kicks a field goal. They miss it. The Giants win. But there's a flag on the play. One of my idiot Giants players jumped offside on a field goal attempt, which makes it 5 yards closer. And then they kick it 43 yards away. It's good. Giants lose 30-29. I was not amused at this moment in time as a Giants fan who's very used to seeing my team lose. But you know what? The sun comes out tomorrow and there's another game to play. Right? And so sometimes you sort of are excited for something. Sometimes you feel really good. And then meh. I go through the suffering as a Giants fan. I go through the suffering and one day it'll be good again. It'll be a while.
It's all right. As a Dolphins fan, I thank the Giants every day. for beating the Patriots.
And
That's
we
true.
sympathize with you because for so many years as Bucks fans,
Yeah.
we suffered the same way.
I moved here and I have to root for Tom Brady.
That's
It's
it.
very depressing.
That's it.
It is very depressing. But again, it's that sort of long suffering in a way. And when you die, you don't care about the Giants game that happened, whatever it is. That's not,
I'm not sure.
part of it. You think that in the afterlife you're gonna watch, you're gonna help blow the field goal, of course. But exactly right? And so it's just like when we're gone, we don't have to worry about any of this stuff.
You have to find the right angel.
Yes, Worry is for the living. Stress is for the living. I think that's what he's trying to say here. But the people who aren't born yet, you know what? They're going to be here eventually, and then they're going to deal with all this Michigas too. But right now they aren't here, so you know what? They don't have to worry about it. But eventually they will, and that's what's hard. Not that it's better to be not around. It's just the idea that when you're here, that's when you're dealing with all of this. That's when you have to deal with all the stress. When you're gone, you don't have to think about it so much. You don't have to worry. Again, worry is a concern of the living. So I wouldn't have to worry about it so much afterwards. Okay, I see it's almost 8 o'clock. So what I do want to do is get to what I call the Mishigas ending of this book. So if you can turn your damp pages all the way to the end of this book. I don't know what page that even is in this thing.
29.
Yes, well, it's surgery here trying to get this thing turned. Okay, and I'm going to turn this all the way back for y'all. That'd be a quick way of doing this. Okay. Turning to every page, turn. Oh, there was an easy way of doing this. Oh, well. Okay, so this guy's written this book, and it's just depressing. And it speaks about, again, food, wine, enjoy your spouses while they're here, like all that other good stuff. Have that opportunity, and everything else is sort of futility. But now we have the end of the book. And I envision, much like another book we've read together before, much like Job, the rabbis read this book and went, "Ugh, we can't sell this. This ain't right. We need to, tack on some kind of ending here to make this make any kind of sense with the other 38 books in the Bible." And so that's my own opinion. That sort of this ending was sort of not the original authors, whatever it might be, but it was a little bit, a redaction at the end. A further word against them, my son, be warned. The making of books is without limit, and much study is a wearying of the flesh. But the sum of the matter, when all is said and done, revere God and observe God's commandments. This applies to all humankind, and God will call every creature to account for everything unknown, be it good or bad. So revere God, et cetera, et cetera. It's actually repeated twice. It's not a typo. It is repeated twice. And that's what we have. So in the end, what matters? Mitzvot. We're back to commandments. Man didn't mention commandments once in this entire thing. But in the end, the Rebbe's got together and said, we need some commandments in here, make that make more sense, for us in the sense of rabbinic Judaism, right? Mitzvot matter. Mitzvot are important. Living a good life matters, right? It's not, you do whatever you want, you're going to die anyway. That's not Jewish theology. It's never been. You have to have some sense of morality, of right and wrong, of these things actually mattering, that we have to, try and strive to live a good life. The ribeye steak is good, but you have to, again, go to a kosher steakhouse, according to them. But that being said, you have to, again, do the right things, you live a moral, ethical life. That's what counts. Where, again, I don't get from Kohelet, the rest of the book, that the author actually cares that much about it. He says better to be good than bad, but in the end, you're going to die anyway. And there's a lot more injustice in the world and also other sort of things that don't match up. And in the end, the rabbis want it to be more in line with classical theology. You do good stuff happens. You do bad stuff happens. So let's try to do good in the world. So their way of sort of fixing the text a little bit, just tightening it up a little bit for the modern reader.
It's kind of a depressing chapter, though.
The book itself is not well, but see that's the question. It's a great question, right? Because it is depressing on the read, right? Like it's not an easy book, but it's depressing. But is it false in a lot of ways? I think it's the question. And so he's speaking a kind of truth. I did this reading over the holidays. It's from Heschel, but the idea behind it was that death is not a bad thing. Death is us returning a gift that came to us freely, and so death is, a life well lived, so to speak. It's that idea that when we do that, then death isn't a bad thing for the pious, for the righteous in a way, because they know So they have faith, I should say, in that moment. It's a hard one. I'm not telling you I agree with it. I'm just saying that, you know.
Because life is a gift. And you said, I like the way you said, it's a gift that was given to us freely.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And so I think when I read this, like, it's a hard book to read. I think it reminds, I'm going to use myself, it reminds me, I think, even if I don't believe in every word of it in terms of just do I agree with it, always no. But it does remind me of that greater theme of impermanence, which is true. Whether it's good or bad doesn't matter. You know, I had a professor of mine always used to laugh. He was a philosophy professor, because that's what philosophy professors do. They laugh about a lot of the stuff about, you know, right and wrong, good and bad, because in their mind, a lot of it's subjective, right? And so what's good for you might be good for me. What's good for this person might be good for that person, you know? And there's a lot of relativism, you know, in philosophy. But, you know, from a religious perspective, you know, we want to believe that what we're doing is right, what we're doing is good, that it matters and has some resonance. And it's not going to be lost. It's not all futility. You know, that's the part that I struggle with, right? It's that idea. And it's like futility I don't love as a translation. I think it's more that everything is impermanent. Everything is, you know, ephemeral, that nothing is forever. And so if that is the case, then if the message is cherish every day, I'll take it. You know, I'll take it. Okay, my friends, it is 8:02. If you have some desire to grab some cheese on the way out, you can certainly do that. That which is not waterlogged. You can grab a bit of that. I see some people did have a little bit of a beverage at home, a spirituous beverage. So that's a nice thing to see. Hope everyone enjoyed. We're going to be in person and on Zoom next week again. Hopefully with a little bit better weather. But we will continue on next week. And don't forget Simchat Torah. And Simchat Torah Yisker is next Tuesday at 10:30, I believe, at Bethel. So something for everyone, okay?
Rabbi,
Yeah.
was there a handout?
Yeah, the handout's what you're seeing on the slides here. It's the same
So
thing.
so you have a written version of that you handed
Yeah.
out?
Yeah.
I mean, if we want that, how can we can you email it to us, or
Yeah,
should we?
just send me an email, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll do that. Thank you all so much. We'll catch you later, okay?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye-bye, everybody.